So just wanted to do a voice record just so I've got something down recorded about this as well, because I need to do a more detailed write-up and description about this, right? So the Russell Brand, right? Russell Brand was accused of a crime quite a while ago, actually, and it was in the news. Well, actually, I think he mentioned it himself. He actually mentioned it on his own channel, I think, first. I think he did mention it on his own channel first, but the news reported on it, right? And then you've got these other incidents like MPs, right? Like Mike Amesbury, who punched someone and the video got out. And then you've got Dan Norris, the MP, apparently was arrested for these child abuse or child offence, right? Now, firstly, as a side subject, which I'm not going to discuss in this talk, the police have got the privileges wrong. I'm pretty sure about that. The police haven't interpreted the parliamentary privileges properly. They're not meant to be arrested during times of Parliament at all, or detained. They can they're meant to be able to proceed with the prosecution if it was a serious crime, which was a felony, treason, things like that, right? They could prosecute, right, while Parliament is being held in sessions, but the person is never arrested or imprisoned until after Parliament's finished, because the electors have got a legal right for them to be represented in Parliament because they voted for that person, right? If it's a minor offence, a very, very minor offence, they don't prosecute or bring the prosecution until after Parliament's finished, right? Until the end of the Parliaments. And that's just the way it is. That's what it actually is. People can bring civil cases against MPs during Parliament and get, money if they owe them money, right? But they can't be arrested or imprisoned. And also another thing is, this is another thing that we're all getting scammed with. You don't have to turn up in court by yourself if you appointed someone to represent you, as long as you're not under bail or conditions or arrest or whatever, right? Even in criminal. Now, obviously, if you're an MP and you've got immunity from arrest, then you don't have to be in court, and the court dates might clash with Parliament anyway, so you've got a legal right to, if you've got someone representing you, you're representing you. Now, the thing is with an MP that even if they get convicted during Parliament time, if it's a serious offence, they don't go to prison until after Parliament time, so there's no need for them, if they've got someone to represent them, even if they get convicted, it's not all this kind of, sending the police to grab them or whatever because they didn't turn up, or being in contempt for not turning up, if you've got someone representing you, right? Now, the thing with that privileges is that they abolished the felony, and they said that all felonies are going to be treated just as a misdemeanor, right? Now, if they've abolished felony, there's no word or usage of indictment at all in the Act. It just says felony. Now, if they've abolished felony and all felony is just going to be treated as a misdemeanor, right, then really all of them are going to be treated as minor. So that means that MPs cannot really be tried at all until in between parliaments, right, or after, or in between the sessions. And this is when, so they can only really get convicted after or in between sessions, right? When Parliament's not in sessions or being held, and therefore you're only really going to get a recall petition. An MP can be removed by a petition of electorates, but they can do that themselves. That's what they're trying to do with the Michael Westwood petition, getting 3 million signatures, but the Parliament don't want to do it. It's only that in the Recall Act, if they get prosecuted, they set up a little automatic system where there's a recall petition, but that's just all facilitated, right? So, and all driving offences, unless it's dangerous driving, are all minor. They're all minor offences anyway. So, I can't see how that, Suella Braverman, with a minor offence, it shouldn't be dealt with until after or between. Now, the main point of this video, though, is not about the privilege. It's about the publicity and it's about the effects, right? Now, Russell Brand's not a member of Parliament, but he got accused of a crime or an offence. And when that became public knowledge, people started talking about it, and then Lucy Frazer MP wrote to YouTube, and she also wrote to Brand, and that caused him to be demonetised, all because, but he hadn't been convicted of an offence, right? You're innocent until proven guilty, and any effects on your business or financial things from something when you haven't actually been convicted is wrong, right? Now, and that's a subject that I want to talk about, even for MPs getting suspended from their party. This Dan Norris has been suspended from his party by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, right, who's meant to be a lawyer, right? That's a little bit like Russell Brand getting demonetised, right? It's had an effect. Now, firstly, Lucy Frazer was the Secretary of State, but Parliament are always going on about how they don't involve themselves in legal cases, or even when they have a committee meeting, they have to get Speaker has to give a consent to proceed to talk about something if there's an ongoing legal case, or if there is a legal case, right? So why did Lucy Frazer act as an MP, right? Government, sending letters to YouTube and Brand, right? If that affects or causes an effect on a legal case and the implications on the person, that means Lucy Frazer, did she get consent from the Speaker? I don't think she did, right? Now, this is what this talk is going to sort of be based around, and that is more like the press and the newspapers' effect on persons' individual private lives when they haven't been convicted or proved guilty of an offence, and what really shouldn't be being said in the newspapers, right? And that's the subject. Now, I was reading some of these old Justices of the Peace newspapers and some of the old London Gazettes, right? And what I noticed is that they're purely legal, so it's not like a newspaper who's got some entertainment, some advertisements, some local stories, and then a little bit of legal and some things, right? Those Justice of the Peace publications are purely legal, right? So they're very strict with the legal rules, right? And what I found is, when they're doing legal cases, right, when they're commenting on any case or any legal situation or anything, right, they don't mention the person's name. They put A or B, right? Like, A, was charged with, theft, right, of B's wallet, right, or whatever. Sometimes it doesn't even say whether it's a male or female, right? And that's just what they do. And I started to think, I'm like, this isn't actually telling you who it is, but it's telling you kind of like what happened, just reporting and briefing on what happened, or that something did happen. A man was robbed in, Norwich Town Centre on Thursday, a handbag was stolen, can any witnesses come forward? It never says who it is, right? Or a man was charged with this or that. Now, I've noticed them do that now sometimes when they choose to, when they fancy. I've seen them in modern newspapers now sometimes say, a man was arrested on suspicion of blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't say Russell Brand, does it? Right? And it doesn't say Dan Norris. Why would you get suspended from a party if you hadn't been convicted of an offence? I don't know. Obviously it affects the integrity of the party, but it should have said that, a man was arrested, in Bath on suspicion of, blah, this or that. He's not been convicted. Now, if his constituents, what has his constituents got a right to know or not? If he's convicted, the thing is, he can't actually be prosecuted during the Parliament time, right? At least on minor offences. And I don't think on serious ones now they've abolished the felony, really, because... And that means that he's actually not I don't know why that's a problem, because for crimes and offences, they can be prosecuted anyway, right? And then I know they've got a certain amount of time to do it, but if it's more serious, they get more time anyway, right? And, a lot of times they've got they ask questions and then they go off and do a lot more investigating. So this is the thing. I mean, you just give them time to get more evidence, you know. There's no problem, you know, if they get more time to get more evidence and build a stronger case and find out more facts by the time at the sessions, then they've got a stronger case, right? Because they've had more time to look into it, right? And they can prioritise other things, right? When they're more serious thing, well, other cases to deal with, like, you know, backlog of cases, right? Now, I'm pretty sure, right, that Lucy Frazer, no matter how the government want to control the media or, you know, all this 77th Brigade removing media posts and stuff like that, right, I'm quite certain that Lucy Frazer has broken the law, or at least broken privilege of Parliament or something, because she's an MP. Doesn't matter whether she's Secretary of State or not, right? It's parliamentary business, right? If to discuss or touch on certain legal cases which could have implications on them in a committee meeting, like petitions meeting, they've got to ask for the Speaker, right? But Lucy Frazer didn't do that, did she? It wasn't a committee meeting, but she's still an MP and it's still a government department under Parliament, right? And it was parliamentary intervention. Now, they're always going on about saying, oh, you know, I don't intervene in legal cases, I don't intervene in legal cases. When you send a letter or do something which has an implication on a person's private financial business, right, and their livelihood and income when they haven't been convicted of a crime, you're interfering in someone else's business, right? And that's really why the newspapers aren't really supposed to mention the name. Now, I don't know. I haven't read every single one of the modern laws, but I've read a lot of the older ones, and I've just seen how they do it in the newspaper. Now, this is why they've got the Parliamentary Papers Act. Now, the newspapers can report on anything political, right? Like, you know, Yaxley Lennon with his, you know, rape gang videos and all that kind of stuff. That's why he shouldn't really be prosecuted, I think, right? And then anything that's said or done in Parliament or reported on from Parliament, you know, things like that, they're allowed to put certain things, right? But not for normal legal cases. Now, when a judge puts an order that it can't be reported on, I don't really think that you're meant to hear about it at all, right? I don't even meant to say, like, you know, a man was robbed with a handbag on Tuesday, whatever. It's just, like, not there, right? And I think what's got misconstrued is that when they do report on it, until someone's been actually convicted, really, they're not meant to say the name. Now, after some people do get convicted, you know, they have a reporter in the court, and court reporters can and can't say certain things. And you know, I actually, after I got prosecuted on one occasion, I know that there was something in the newspaper about it under my name, and that's a contempt. That's quite interesting because the prosecution against me was illegal anyway, which is a contempt from the judge and a contempt from the police and a contempt from the court under the parliamentary paper, under the usage of Parliament, for sure, absolutely certain. So those newspaper actually reports against me were contempt, and I know that they existed because I saw them. I looked at it myself. I saw it on the internet. So that newspaper's actually made a contempt against me, an illegal act. So that is a contempt of the newspaper, right? And I actually think that over the years, gradually, it slipped. Now, but the only thing is, it's same as the election law. They've forgotten of what the actual rules are. The long established and most ancient rules for elections are that, you know, they're not allowed to treat, but also entertainment is considered a treat. Now, even with the Representation of the People's Act, it does tell you that, but not in as much detail and explicitly. It doesn't, like, elaborate on it, but it is still there. Like Boris Johnson's newspaper column was definitely legal if it was affecting his popularity for election or even unpopularity for election, right? And nothing ever got done about it. You know, Rees-Mogg as well. He's still on TV. You know, I don't know how he can still be on there. They're still paying him money. He didn't help his election though, but he's still getting paid a lot of money out of it. Now, but that's, you know, reporting on things like that and talking about it is political anyway. That you know, so now coming back to this, So I mentioned Lucy Frazer, right? Now, Article 9 of the 1688 Bill of Rights, which is the one that we're always using for Parliament, is that illegal prosecutions by the King's Bench for matters cognisable, decidable, debatable only in Parliament. Well, Parliament don't hear judicial cases. On a rare occasion now, they can put something through, a bill through, to get people convictions overturned and things like that. So it kind of technically is possible, but it's not something that they engage with. In fact, you have to get the Speaker's permission on a lot of these things if there's an ongoing certain legal cases and stuff like that, which Lucy Frazer didn't. So illegal prosecutions by the King's Bench for matters cognisable, debatable and in Parliament, well, it was for the courts to decide. Election petition can be decided in Parliament and in courts. But they're actually trying to make out that it can't be decided in Parliament when it can. That was one thing they lied about. So they were lying that election petitions, they were trying to say that they can't be done in Parliament when they can be done in Parliament and court. Yet legal cases, they always say that Parliament is not to intervene or shouldn't intervene or even talk about it or comment on it, right? But Lucy Frazer acted, right? Now, she shouldn't have done anything. Now, this is the thing. Like on Big Brother Watch, right? See, Parliament, and this is the, right. So what I wanted to say about Big Brother Watch is this. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, wants to bring in all these powers so that governments can monitor bank accounts and, people claiming benefits and all these other powers and remove driving licenses and things like that. Now, they're actually judicial powers. They're court powers. They're actually wanting Parliament to be able to kind of like engage or interfere with the judicial process. Now, this is the thing. They're adamantly saying that we can't ask Parliament to decide on legal cases, and they won't even let you publish a petition to ask for someone to be appealed or released from prison or whatever. They don't want to. But what Keir Starmer is actually proposing to do with these powers that Big Brother Watch are telling us about, they're wanting to bring in, is actually give judicial powers or powers that can affect a punishment on someone, like take the driving licence or stop their bank account or whatever. Well, that's judicial power and authority. But Parliament have been adamant in saying that they don't want to get involved in legal cases and the justice system must carry its process. Now, it's usually the court that makes an order for that. So I'm quite confused why Keir Starmer wants to make Parliament into a court again, but yet Gordon Brown, a key Labour person, really wanted to ditch that Parliament being a court and judicial authority with the House of Lords and reform the Constitutional Reform Act, and have it in the Supreme Court. But Keir Starmer kind of like, now he's like, oh, well, the House of Commons should be able to effectively action or make affect judicial authority and powers or meddle in them. But, as they started allowing us to publish petitions about legal cases, not officially, they've said on a number of occasions, see your MP or whatever, but they don't let you put an e-petition so everyone can sign it, like release Tommy Robinson, right? They won't publish it on there. So I'm concerned of where Keir Starmer's going with this, because if Keir Starmer says that government departments, right, not courts, government departments like DVLA or even House of Commons or whatever, can direct and initiate a driving licence being taken away from someone, or closing the bank account down, or whatever. What he's actually effectively doing is that's what the House of Lords used to do, right? Because they could do that if a case got referred there. So what Keir Starmer's doing is almost like doing a moonwalk on Gordon Brown in a very crafty way and trying to make out that he wanted to abolish the Lords. Now, if Keir Starmer wants to abolish the Lords or get rid of them or more Labour people in the Lords, does Starmer just want the Labour Party to be the Crown Prosecution Service? Does he want the Labour Party to be the entire government? Does he want the Labour Party to be all judges? Does he just want the Labour Party to be the government, supreme, whatever, not and not having other parties, doesn't even want to scrap elections, you pull your driving license and pull your right to vote, but yet, Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson are still voting, this is the thing. Keir Starmer's got problems. He's doing some very questionable and contradictory things that I can't see how it can work and fit into the system. And MI5 and the police are really pushing for this because they just want total power. But Gordon Brown didn't want that. Gordon Brown, and even Tony Blair is meant to be the master of, it's someone else's problem, or the master of, mechanisms of implementation, right? What way is Gordon Brown going if he wants to get rid of Parliament as a court, or try to get rid of it as a court? But Keir Starmer now seems to be going back the other way. So, shall we reintroduce the, Appeal Like Jurisdiction Act? Keir Starmer is, I don't think that he knows what he's doing. I really don't. And a lot of people, some people have said this, he was the director of prosecutions, he ran the CPS, he's done these important, Privy Council cases, he ran the police, but I don't actually think that his mind can encompass the law of this country and actually know where he is or what he's doing. He's kind of almost like a lost sheep in a field, and he's wanting to do certain things, but he ain't taking into consideration the whole valley, right? I don't actually think that he knows what he's doing, and I don't think that these MI5 people or security or senior police do, and I think that there's certain things that they like and want, but they don't actually really know, they're not in the thick of it. And I think that the novelty and the wants and needs of, we want all this new gadgets, text and surveillance and powers, they haven't evaluated where they are and what they're doing. And what they're actually doing is wrong. Could actually be illegal. Just with that Lucy Frazer example. Now, if a person like Russell Brand wants to, broadcast to his followers or whatever that, he's been prosecuted or whatever, maybe he's not allowed to say it himself, in the law. I'm not sure, but I need to check up on that. But I'm quite certain that at some point, what they've done is the part where you just can't speak about it at all, versus like you can speak about it but not mention the names, and then you can mention the names after once they've been convicted because it's official. And the newspapers somehow have got the wrong they've got the wrong kind of like they've got the wrong parameters mixed up for each category. They've misconstrued what they can and can't do for each category, and now they're just kind of saying what they want, and no one's stopping them. Now, I just want to... This is important here, right? Because what's actually happened is political opponents are all nipped in, the bud in tax. Right, so what that means to say is that political parties, what Keir Starmer's wanting to do, take people's driving licences, shut the bank accounts down, kind of like what Trudeau was doing in Canada to those truckers and things like that. We've got a VAT 126 claim, but it's not really properly adequate to claim money back, or if it is, they haven't let us do it, right? This Sir Jim Hara, head of the Inland Revenue and Customs, right? There isn't actually... They haven't given us a way to claim back for petitioning Parliament. Now, what I found out is that you can actually do a petition to Parliament for some money to claim expenses, tax, or even if you've some kind of service, which if you've done an investigation on behalf of the country, it's voluntary service, right? Now, you can get I've seen in the Justice upon Petition book, the Petitions Committee have given recommendations to the courts for people to be awarded certain amounts of money, right? What it says in the Manual of Procedure in Parliament is that if you get a royal referral or a royal, it has to be, you have to get from the Crown has to give you kind of a referral or whatever. Well, I've actually got one of those for mine quite a while ago. So I can actually petition Parliament to claim some money. And I think you actually ask, if it is a petition to Parliament, I think that you claim the money through Parliament. I don't know if you claim it through Inland Revenue, and Jim Harry doesn't seem to know anything about it. But by them not making that clear that we can claim money back, and also, like from people buying materials, banners, signs, it shouldn't really be taxed. It costing people a lot more money, and they're having to pay tax in the newspaper, so they can't advertise it in the newspaper yet. Johnson's getting his entertainment column, right? Boris Johnson. And what that does is it makes it a lot more expensive now, and with the prices of the newspapers for advertising and for the tax they put on it, and they don't knock it off for you when they should, because in the Value Added Tax Act it's a Schedule 9 body, and no one needs a VAT number for a Schedule 9 body because it's too small to have one, but you're still entitled to not pay the tax, and they can knock it off. You'd have to claim it back after. You shouldn't be paying it in the first place, right? So you shouldn't really need to claim it back through Revenue and Customs because you shouldn't have been paying it in the first place, right? You should have claimed exemption at point of sale. Now, the government haven't really cared about that or given a monkey's chuff, because what that does is financially assist and give relief to individual petitioners, right? Individuals. And it will help them, it will nurture them with their campaigns, because they can afford to do stronger and better campaigns, and they can grow into bigger campaigns, right? So it's not very fertile soil for political independent petitions or small bodies. So less of them can grow into bigger bodies and political parties. And then they end up trying to get everyone, women fought for the vote for so long, but they end up just voting for Labour, right? What's the point in fighting for your vote if you're just going to, now we can all vote for Labour. So rather than, 5 for Labour and 10 for Tory, it's like 100 for Labour and 100 for Tory. What's the point? All it does is add zeros onto each side, but it's the same. What's the point in fighting for a vote if there's not going to be lots of different things to vote for, right? The main parties have been hijacked. This government have set it up. There's high competition for other parties to become popular and compete. This is what happens in America when you just end up with, Trump or Biden or whatever. So the whole thing with the financial funding and tax, but yet these big business people have been really clever for themselves, and they've got this non-profit system where they've just been absolutely financially ripping us off through the business, commerce, right? Corporate commerce, and then all their profits, they've just been giving them to all these nice little non-profit things and not to pay tax on it, and then been able to do all kinds of experiments and science things and little things and all kinds of little, all these, Fauci projects and all sorts of stuff, right? And where are all the political parties, like this Heritage Party or the Love Party or these other parties? They don't grow big and strong. And the government have not been encouraging or giving a nurturing fertile soil for that to flourish, right? And also, now with MPs, I think this whole Keir Starmer kicking, suspending Dan Norris and everything like that, they can also not just use that against their own members, they can use it against other parties and other persons. And they're even sacrificing their own people now, but it shouldn't be in the newspaper until they've been convicted. It should just say, a man was, it couldn't even say an MP. Well, if it's in a certain county, you're likely to guess what MP it is, but I don't think that it should say the name of the person. It should just report on, a man was punched here or there, but this footage is getting out, but that's why it's not really supposed to get out. And, therefore, you've got this kind of now, what's happening is that stories are getting out and things are getting told just through social media and hearsay, which it wouldn't have done in the newspapers before. When someone's not actually been convicted of a crime, so it's not like they've been convicted. I mean, names are on listings, but they just used to have them in the court, didn't they, up on the wall. So, you could go. But I don't even know if the newspaper was allowed to put it unless it was on the day or not. I'm not sure. They were released at certain times, the listings, certain persons in court, but I don't know if they will. I think they've got the court listing that someone's on trial, but on trial it doesn't actually, it's not, I'm not actually joshing you on this is very clear now in my mind, right? So the the report in the newspaper that a man was arrested on suspicion of, rape on Tuesday at 5 o'clock, in the Bronsworth pub, if any witnesses come forward, but they don't mention his name. But, if someone, they can put a description of the hat or whatever, and also in witness things, right? Now, that of itself is one thing in a newspaper. But, 4 weeks later or whatever, I don't think that item or that report that doesn't give the details until convicted, I think that is to be regarded as a separate thing from when a news reporter goes to a courtroom and the court listings are up and there's a list of people. It just says that Mr. Johnson is in court on Tuesday, right? It might be able to give the case number, but it doesn't. That's the listing information, which isn't privileged, right? But the case files are on what he's done and the accusations and so forth, right? But to be associated, but, if you want to be a newspaper reporter and go through the court listings and then look at all the cases that you reported on, you might be able to, join the dots up and draw lines across and say, oh, that's probably likely that guy and that's probably likely that guy. But I don't think that you're meant to know that unless you be detective in the press. And that's what the newspapers were doing. That's where they were. They were at the court reporting on it and so forth. Now, I might be wrong about this, but this is just what I want to record now so I can check it later and not forget. From what I've seen in the newspapers, it looks like I might be right, or at least in the ones that were seriously on legal issues. And the main newspapers were meant to follow that legal rule because that's why they got night lawyers. But I think they gradually didn't. I think they gradually got slacker. And, and now with social media, it's just, it's very difficult to contain certain things unless, it's come from central government and there's some kind of 77th Brigade scouting social media and taking things down before it's up or whatever, right? But they're definitely not doing that with the main press or newspapers. Now, let's just go on to another aspect of it. So in the 1755 Samuel Johnson Dictionary, prejudice. So prejudice is from prejudice. Prejudice, that is to judge something before. It's to be judged before. Now, this is the thing. When a defendant or someone accused goes to trial, they're being tried before a jury, right? It's the jury's trying them, right? And the information is to be put before the court. That's why, the police, it's confidential, right? Now, they're to be the jury's to try them, not the public. They're not to be tried by the public or the public to say, this or that. Now, the court, currently, there's some channels are saying that, oh, yeah, we can't comment on this case or that case, or we're not supposed to say this or that. But I don't think you're meant to know that there is, that you're not meant to say, Russell Brand's in court and we can't comment on this or that and while it's running. I think that all we're supposed to know is a man's being charged of sexual, assault on, 6 women or whatever. Because when the police are asking people to come forward, right, I don't think that the police are meant to have it's like have a field day on bulk charges. Anyone who got any charges against Russell Brand, come on down, the price is right. I think that if someone has reported that they've had an offence, right, someone sexually abused them, then they're meant to report, a woman was sexually, a man has been charged with sexual abuse with a woman or for something that happened on the 15th of November, whatever, 2022, right? And then he gets tried for that. Because then, you see, if they just say, who it is, and then you get loads of people coming forward might just make it up, right? And that is putting you at risk for potentially fake ones, and a lot of these rely mainly on statements, right? And that is wrong. And then you get people like Lucy Frazer, which is the key thing to this, Lucy Frazer, right? What Lucy Frazer is doing is prejudicially, with prejudice, without a jury verdict, Lucy Frazer is actually interfering in a legal case, possibly without permission from a speaker. Further than that, she's writing letters to someone's private personal business manager, like YouTube, and causing Russell Brand's livelihood to be affected. Now, that is completely wrong. And this is sort of like what's going on with these MPs, like Dan Norris and Mike Amesbury, who didn't even know their proper and privileges law properly, right? Now, let's just read what it says for prejudice, right? Prejudice, 1, to prepossess with unexamined opinions, to fill with prejudices, right? So the examination can only be done in the court, right? So it is unexamined. So they haven't really examined Brand, but they're prepossessing with opinions, right? And prejudice. Now, the thing is, you might say, well, they're actually not talking about what he did or what he didn't do, who it was or whatever. But it is because they're saying that they're talking about an act that he might not have done. What they're doing is they're saying that there might even been an act or that there was an act. But no one knows because they haven't decided yet if an act occurred or not, or a crime, right? Therefore, Brand hasn't committed one. A man has been accused of an offence or crime, right? And this is a thing. This is a sensational modern media that carries away with it. And further, Parliament, who are not meant to engage in judicial capacity, and Gordon Brown made a big effort to get rid of the House of Lords, and Keir Starmer now wants to give itself power to take away driving licences and all kinds of things. Lucy Fraser's writing letters to companies and businesses, which results in a punishment of Russell Brand on his private personal income, right? This is wrong. This is actually what the basis is. And when they're talking about, we can't comment on the case, well, you're talking about the case. This is a thing. And you're actually talking about the person. Like, there might have been some... You're discussing that, Brand's been accused of something and the potential that he might have done it. That is you're examining the facts, because you've got some facts. Now, you're not meant to have any facts, and you're not meant to know who it is. You're meant to know that something happened, and what kind of generally it was, right? Quite minimal. That's what I think from what I've read in the old newspapers, but I might be wrong, but I don't think that it's changed, because it's a general certain principle underlying it. Now, here it says, number 3, prejudice. This is the second meaning of prejudice, right? To obstruct or injure by prejudices previously raised, right? Well, so the accusation against Brand has now resulted in him being injured because he's lost his monetisation. That's an injury, right? And he's been obstructed from his monetisation. Dan Norris has been obstructed from being a member of the Labour Party and injured through prejudice, right? When he couldn't even been arrested in the first place. So I really don't know what Lucy Fraser's actually playing at when you've got, for example, Mark Franchois or Jamie Stone or, Theresa Villiers or whatever MPs, and they're in a live debate and they're talking about, there are some ULEZ cases going on in the courts at the moment, but we've got consent from the Speaker to, discuss this and talk about it, although it's, not affect the cases or whatever, right? But Lucy Fraser is an MP, or was an MP, but she's not anymore. She's been kicked out because she was for Cambridge, right? I don't know whether she did it on purpose or she was set up to do it, or whether she's just stupid or not. But what she's actually done is wrong. But this is kind of what Starmer's wanting to do, but affecting Russell Brand's, but not even, they're wanting to do what Lucy Fraser did, write to YouTube and say demonetise him or take someone's driving licence or shut his bank account down. But yet, independently from a court, or just because they've been investigating something, but aren't things supposed to be investigated by police? not by the government. This is the thing. So we'll go on to the other meaning anyway. To injure, to hurt, to diminish, to impair, to be detrimental to. So actually the word prejudice, besides just having some kind of opinion formed before it's had proper determination, is also just purely on the injury part of it. To prejudice purely can also, another meaning of it is mainly on the actual damage or injury. So this is what Mike Amesbury, Dan Norris and Russell Brand have, and also who else? What's that? Alex Belfield as well, for example. But he was going full on his channel all about his legal case, which he shouldn't really have been doing. And in a way, Alex Belfield was completely doing the absolute opposite as well, right? But choosing to himself. Now here it says to prejudge. So these are from the 1773, same dictionary, Samuel Johnson, but a different year. Those ones were the 1755. These are the 1773. So this is prejudge. Prejudice is to prejudge, right? It is a prepossession judgment formed beforehand without examination. It is used for prepossession in favour of anything or against, or in favour of anything or against it. It's sometimes used with to before that which the prejudice is against, but not properly. And then here we've got mischief, right? So the other interpretation for prejudice in this edition of the dictionary is mischief, detriment, hurt, injury. So this sense is only accidental or consequential, a bad thing being called a prejudice only because prejudice is commonly a bad thing and is not derived from the original or etymology of the word. If it were therefore better to use it less, perhaps prejudice ought never to be applied to any mischief, which does not imply some partiality or prepossession. In some of the following examples, its impropriety will be discovered. So we've got here a court hearing. So a hearing is meant to be when it gets heard, right? So a court hearing, that's actually when it does get heard. Now this is the thing. You go to a hearing and the public can attend, right? So you go into a court, it gets listed, your name's on there, you're in court on Tuesday. Now that is the official hearing that you yourself are accused of these things, and then the full facts come out and then a jury decides and the public can attend and officially hear it then. They're not going to officially hear all that before. Now, if you're in a newspaper and it says like, a man A was arrested on Tuesday on suspicion of assault, right? What's been heard? Well, we know that an event occurred and the police might want to ask if anyone witnessed it, but it cannot prejudice the case or have any injury on the person because they have not yet been convicted and they're innocent until they've been guilty. So they can't have Lucy Frazer, who's not even a judge, writing letters to YouTube to detrimental of their livelihood. That's for sure, right? The official hearing that it was this person who did it and the full facts, you can go to the trial and hear it, right? And get the listing, and the newspaper guy can turn up then. And then after that point, obviously when he comes back out of the court again, then he can say that, Rob Bondsworth was convicted of discharge, right? But this is when the court can put restrictions on, right? Because they don't want to get any information out. So the reporter can only continue to go, A, was accused of offence or whatever, and then they can say A was in court. But the unfortunate thing is that the people have seen the listings, like the newspaper reporter or people that turned up, right? But it's not when they go in the newspaper and get mass published. This is newspaper publications, right, for normal legal cases. Because it's defamatory, because it's detrimental on the person. And this is why there were all this argument about the 1840 Parliamentary Papers Act and the fact that, if it's to do with Parliament or for a petition or something that's protected under political law, then that's why you get the Parliamentary Papers Act and a certificate from the Speaker and you can't be prosecuted. This is, that goes on to Yaxley Lennon. This is the actual Yaxley Lennon stuff, right? Where it was to Parliament, but it caused injury on the other person, but it was exempted. And what's actually happening is Russell Brand and Mike Amesbury and Dan Norris have actually suffered some kind of injury, party suspension or detriment more than the person who Yaxley Lennon put out the information out against. And he got done and put in prison for doing that when he was the one who was protected. But from these normal legal cases that aren't political, you're not allowed to do that, including Lucy Frazer. And Keir Starmer shouldn't have suspended Amesbury or the other guy until convicted. But these guys didn't even know their own privileges or protection from arrest or protection during sessions of Parliament. Even Suella Braverman, with summary driving things, which are extremely small misdemeanors, right? See Justice of the Peace. Yeah, so that newspaper, how it's written out in the Justice of the Peace newspaper, how they're reporting on examples and cases, I'm pretty sure that's how it's meant to be done. And I think that they've just got slack. And they've kind of like each of your three, they've done a cup and ball trick where they've managed to juggle it so one of them means the other. So it's like, when they say not allowed to report on it now, it's like, they've mixed the categories up to what they're meant to be. And just through people knowing stuff and, newspaper reporters have been to that many courts that, it might be obvious to people who it is, but that's why the court's meant to say, put a thing on it, even if it's been on the, because the court listings don't tell you who's done what crime, and I don't know whether they should do. When those court listings are up, it does actually say the name of the person and the offence, right? I'm not too sure whether it should do that. It definitely doesn't put anything about the case details or whatever. I don't even know whether the Ministry of Justice have kind of like, well, I'll have to check the actual changes in the law, the actual changes in the legislation, the legislative changes, but I definitely don't think that it wasn't the done thing in the 1800s. MP accountable to electors. Right, citizens accountable to jury. Yeah, so what I mean to say by that is, like, an elected MP is accountable to his electors, right? They've elected him to represent them in Parliament, and they've got a legal right to have someone in Parliament representing them for their party, for the party they voted for as well, right? And this is where I think Starmer's in error, because if they voted for Mike Amesbury, Labour, right? They voted. He ran on Labour, and they've elected. Well, I don't like political parties. I don't think we should have political parties. I think political parties are just stupid and wrong, because particularly with the local council rules, with all this kind of impartiality, it doesn't work. And you can't have control of council with impartiality and selflessness. It can't possibly work, right? It defies logic, right? But going on the current model that they're pushing. If you've elected Dan Norris and he ran on Labour and you voted for a Labour MP, right, then not only are you entitled to have Dan Norris turn up in Parliament and represent you as electorates, and he talks about this in the Jefferson parliamentary practice book, the American one. It goes into a lot more detail of like that you've got the legal right to have a representative like in Congress and in the Senate or whatever, right? But that's the same as Parliament. This is what William Prynne talks about as well, right? They've got a legal right to have someone in Parliament. Now, a lot of times sometimes even the MPs are slack and don't, how many times have we watched the Parliament channel and there's no one there? There's no one there. We're not getting MPs to represent us in half of these things. They just do what the party wants, because maybe Keir Starmer doesn't want them to turn up and doesn't want them to vote and have an opinion because they're doing what he says, right? But this is why how Keir Starmer has whipped these whips and controlling the MPs through a party when they're meant to represent the constituents, right? That's wrong as well, because every MP should be in every debate. Now you might say, well, when at the surgery? Well, William Prynne said that if an MP can't be in Parliament, people have got a legal right to have someone there for them, speak for them, right? Now, this is where the servants come in, the MP servants and the parliamentary staff. So, you've got a surgery and, you go in there and you want to see someone about an issue to do with Parliament. Well, usually it's the MP schedule. I'm running surgery from Tuesday to Thursday and I'm going to be in my office, right? But there should always be the office available. Now, if Dan Norris is in Parliament, right, and if he's in a debate and the chamber's not empty, or he's in a committee meeting or whatever, right, in a petition committee, right, then he's got servant staff in his surgery. So you go into the surgery and you say, this is the office of Dan, and I would like to him to sort something out for me. What can I do for you, right? We can talk about it face to face in detail, not in stupid emails or over the phone, and then that's it. It's almost like you don't have to, it doesn't have to be Michael Jackson or, Paul McCartney, or, you're not going to see a David Beckham or he's not signing autographs. You're going to the office of the MP over a matter that you want him to sort out, whether he's there or not. And I think this is how they're jipping us off. This is how the political parties are, petitions used to take up a large amount of time in the chamber, but now they don't, right? Because, we don't want them to, because then, people will be in control of politics, not parties, right? And I think that's what they've done with the surgery office. That leaves a lot less time for surgery hours, less people can be seen. My MP hadn't even replied to me yet. I think it was a one auto reply. My other MP did previously. I was booked in to see him. I've never been to an MP surgery before, and I got one day, the closest I've been to it is like the day before or something, and the whole country got locked down. It would have been nice to have been to an MP surgery, in my life once, seen an MP. I did get Barry Sheeman to sign something for me once, but, I didn't realise that it wasn't my MP because it was just slightly over the border. I thought it was the same postcode, but it turns out that it wasn't, but it doesn't matter. He signed it anyway. We're meant, and this is the thing with Matt Hancock. He went off and did that TV programme and his constituents complained. I don't know whether that was in Parliament recess or not, but as far as what I gathered from the TV programme is people were complaining that he wasn't there to see them. That, according to William Prynne, is a breach of privilege of Parliament. And actually, that is more serious than this stupid Andrew Bridgen versus Matt Hancock case. That when Andrew Bridgen and Matt Hancock are both MPs, right, they're disputing with each other between the followers, right, but it's matters that touch on Parliament. And they can say what they want. They've got freedom of speech. Andrew Bridgen shouldn't have tried to bring that case. If Andrew Bridgen wanted to do something to Matt Hancock to get, revenge or some kind of dignity, he should have really pushed to have got him done by the Privileges Committee for going to that jungle programme, but everyone turned a blind eye. Yet all his people were walking around his constituency, saying, where is he, right? That was the breach of privilege, because he's meant to be there for his people. But the MPs aren't there for the people anyway, because they're only doing limited surgery time. And whenever you turn TV on and watch Parliament, there's no one there, right? So we're getting gypped off. This is why the servants. I mean, it might seem ridiculous to most people to have, elected MPs. Or the servants of MPs in the chamber, but, you can have witnesses in the chamber and people called forward. It might be kind of strange for people to think, there's, Parliament having a session and there's a speaker and there's some MPs, but there's some of their surgery staff or whatever in there. What are they doing in there? They're not elected MPs, you don't elect them, but the MP might be in the surgery. This is the thing. But, is the MP meant to have someone at the surgery to see people 24/7 all the time, like the doctors, you know, and is the MP meant to be as many debates as possible? This is the question. How should it be? We're definitely getting ripped off. They've definitely cut down the hours, and they've definitely, you know, they're putting their wages up, right? So there's something definitely strange going on there. But that's an MP now. The electors vote for the MP. They invest their power in the MP. And they voted for a particular party. So I don't think Starmer should be removing people from parties when they voted for that person in that party. Same goes for Jeremy Corbyn as well. Jeremy Corbyn got thrown out of the party, but his voters invested their power into him to be their MP to represent Labour. So what actual right has a party to say who is in and not in the party when the electors voted for them, like Corbyn, you know? Now, when it comes to courts and justice, it's a jury, right? The jury decides. It's selected at random from the electoral register, and a jury decides, and only the jury will hear the evidence, but the public are entitled to, on the date, go into the court and listen. And there's certain things that they might not be able to talk about when they leave the court, depending on what the judge says, right? But usually most cases get dealt with, you know, there and then, or over a couple of days. And this is where it's all gone wrong, because what's actually happening is Lucy Frazer, an MP, is causing... Well, she's making a intervention in Russell Brand's own private life before he's been tried in court. And they said that they wanted to scrap Parliament having judicial powers. And then they've said that they can't even touch on ongoing cases like Royal Courts of Justice, ULEZ, because but then the Speaker said that they can. But the Speaker never said that Lucy Frazer can write to Russell Brand. You know, oh, she's the Cabinet, she's the Secretary of State. Well, it's going to be the Speaker, right? So there's quite a lot of issues that I've got here. I actually don't think that Keir Starmer knows what he's doing. And I think that we've got these senior police officers, MI5, who are like, you know, whacking off over the latest technology, the latest surveillance, you know, scan your pet dog, see where it's, you know, going on the radar or whatever, and facial recognition. This cool stuff that, you know, they really like it because it helps them know what's going on in the country and monitor people. But the people, no one's voted for it. And police aren't meant to vote. Police officers aren't meant to vote, right? At least before the Great Reform Act, and sheriffs and judges, right? They're not meant to. Because they're the referees in society and they serve us, right? And they're not going to have a political opinion. But what we've also got now is we've got senior police officers and commissioners and police units who get on local council committees and they say, oh yeah, we want some security barriers, or we want facial recognition, or we want this or that, and the council give them it. But that's a political... That's like saying, I want to build an house. You know, you have to get planning permission, right? Well, I'm not going to object to it. But the police are going into these secret meetings and getting this or that. Where's our right to object to it? The police have become like a political party, and one that we don't get to vote for. That they automatically get position, officers, person put in places that we haven't elected. We're meant to elect the mayor. We're meant to elect the chief police. We're meant to elect most of the police. And now they're just getting put there, and they're actually getting a seat. They're getting a seat at a council meeting. It's almost like having a parliamentary seat, but in the local council. And they're not meant to. They're not meant to have it. And this is what the MI5 chief, he blows your mind. Because he wants all these goodies, and we're paying for them. But we haven't voted for them. And the police have got a seat. It's like they've got a parliamentary seat. But then you've got the Secretary of State for Justice and the Secretary of State, you know, the police and crime commissioners and so forth, and these new mayors and everything like that, right? But they're voted for. And then you've got these other MPs who like really like all this tech gadget stuff. Now they're elected, right? And they're in charge of the police. But, you know, the police are just going to them and saying, oh, we want this, we want that. We're not saying we want this or we want that. it's meant to be the electorate, the constituents who say we want this or that, right? But if a police officer is not meant to vote, which they're definitely not doing in the early the Met Police Acts, right? In the first Metropolitan Police Acts, police can't vote. So if a police can't have a vote, how can he vote for or against facial recognition technology? He can't. How can he vote for or against ULEZ? He can't. He can't in the ballot box at the polling station, and he can't at the surgery because he can't go to a surgery for an MP, right? But yet, he's getting this recommendation, right? Recommendations. Well, we know, no, the public are recommending. You know, the public are doing the consultation and recommending. They're almost doing it like speed awareness. You know, oh yeah, you know, we need facial recognition or whatever. They're telling us. No, the police aren't telling us anything that we should have or that we want. You know, that we should have more cameras down or we should have this or that. No, we vote. We're telling them. They don't have a vote on it, right? And this is a problem. So I definitely think Lucy Frazer has broken the law. And I definitely think Keir Starmer, with all these ideas for this, you know, Parliament Central having all these powers, unless they're going to scrap the Constitutional Reform Act and go back to, you know, they're going to go back to, you know, the Appeal Jurisdiction Act, make the House of Lords a court again, and it can work with the House of Commons. You know, is Starmer going to open up the Petitions Committee so, you know, we can start collecting signatures on cases after it's been heard at the courts? And if the public don't like the outcome, after the public turn up in the court and hear the evidence, and the person goes to prison, maybe those people who were there and heard the facts, maybe they all go outside the court and think, all right, now he's been convicted, we can talk about it, it's in the newspaper. And maybe after they heard the evidence and even the jury came out with an outcome, maybe then the whole entire audience at the court who were there, maybe then they think, well, actually, that jury of 12 said this or that, but we've actually got reason to believe that we don't think the jury were right, yeah? And we want to petition Parliament and get 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million signatures, you know, for the release, or for it to be heard in Parliament or whatever. Starmer's going to have to do that. If he wants to start giving Parliament command powers to dabble with justice and take people's money and shut the bank accounts down when they potentially might not have had a fair trial or hearing in a court, or not as the result of a court, which the court are meant to be able to do that through the court order. That's what the court order does, not Parliament, right? The court order is meant to do that, right? I really don't know what Starmer's doing with it, and I'm not talking tosh. I know exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, what the hell are they talking about in a parliamentary committee meeting about a ULEZ case that's running alongside a debate in Parliament about ULEZ, when they said, oh, it's okay, the Speaker says we can talk about it, right, because it might affect the case, right? So why is Lucy Frazer writing letters to YouTube affecting Russell Brand's private, his livelihood? Right? What's she doing? And what's she getting involved in the justice system for? Oh, she hangs around with the judges. You know, she used to, you know, be a person of justice, but then she was on Culture, Media and Sport, right? What's Culture, Media, Sport got to do with justice? Oh, well, you know, it's Russell Brand's got a media channel, but what's that got to do with his charges, right? This is prejudice. So there are a number of serious issues that we've got, and what I need to do is get hold of some newspapers now. Not the Justice of the Peace one is purely legal. So what I need to do is get some newspapers from like the 1800s, 1920s, and see how they were reporting on the legal cases, if they were putting A and B. You know, A robbed a bank or whatever, or a man robbed a bank, which they still kind of do. Because that's what I think that they're only allowed to do until the verdict comes out. And any of the court listings, you know, they're not meant to cross-reference any information. It's almost like, you know when you those people have got the newspaper and they're doing the, like the sweepstake. It's like sweepstake, isn't it? Sweepstake. When you get sweepstake, you're getting the horses and you're comparing. You got one newspaper on the left with all the horses, and then you got a newspaper on the right with all the races, right? And then you're sweepstaking, right? Well, you're working it out. You're adding up. This horse is got to run that race on, and then it's like you're joining the dots up, right? But they're not going to do that. I think the information can be there for court listings, but it's not meant to have. It's just meant to be who's in court on what date, right? And I think that the police report, has got to be like, oh, a man was arrested at 6 o'clock on Tuesday or for an assault, right? And that's it. They're separate until someone's been convicted. I'm quite certain of that. And then anyone who attends the court and finds out any more, that's whether or not it's allowed to be published or not, because it might not finish on that day, it might not complete, right? The public, they've had a hearing, the public have heard about it, but that is different to it being reported. I still question whether the name should appear in direct reference to the charges until there's been a conviction. Now, I could be wrong about that, but looking at the older newspapers, it seems that at least in the legal newspapers, they didn't put any names. Even if they put an example of a case, they didn't. Even if they put maybe some of them were hypothetical or made up, but I think a lot of them were actually based on examples which people were encountering. They were encountering cases and they're asking for advice on them and stuff like that. But I definitely know for sure, I definitely think Lucy Frazer, whatever she's done, I don't know whether it was a setup, whether she was supposed to do that to default on purpose, Cambridge or whatever, but I'm quite certain that she would in truth have been under the same rules as that committee debating ULEZ when there was that ULEZ case on. Because from the point Brander's being accused of something, she's making a representation as a member of parliament, right? And Secretary of State. And that is the reason. It's not just can affect the case, but can affect the person. Well, it isn't affecting the person, right? So, but that's the same with Starmer with his MPs, right? Well, with his MPs being thrown out of the party and so forth, and MPs are meant to be even more protected so they can get on with the work without being hindered or whatever. Now, the thing with Starmer is the judicial system is allowing prejudices and cause and effect on innocent persons like Russell Brand when it's not meant to. Yet, what Keir Starmer's doing is, in Parliament, where you have got the right to mention certain things, where you are exempt in petitions and stuff, not Lucy Frazer talking about legal cases, we're talking about petitions about certain things. If you raise it to Parliament, if you raise the matter to Parliament for a resolution, or, like the Parliamentary Papers Act protects you from any detrimental effects on persons like Yaxley Lennon. But that's the one that we're being punished for. So Yaxley Lennon is being punished for an effect on a member of the public from his political videos, yet they're not prosecuting Lucy Frazer for her effects on Russell Brand, or the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for his effects on Dan Norris or Mike Amesbury, because at that point they were guilty, although Mike Amesbury did eventually get convicted, but he should still, I don't know when the session ends of Parliament, but he shouldn't, the police shouldn't have processed him. They could question him, but, since they scrapped the felony, I don't even think they can question him at all. They shouldn't have, it was 1967 when they scrapped that felony, which isn't that long ago, really. It's only 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's only like, 30, 40 years ago. Or, this is all sort of like, 60s, 70s, 80s, CPS. It's all like the modern bag sort of thing. Very, very modern changes. And Tony Blair did some questionable things, like, you know, with the judicial oath and deals for justice, negotiating or bargaining with the conscience of the individual on their plea and things like that, which is, it's against the judicial oath. You know, they'll do you a favour. You know, we'll give you a lenient sentence if you plead guilty. That's interfering with the conscience of the individual. So there's a lot here. I need to do a little bit more research into the newspapers, but I know for certain they published my name in the newspaper in regards to a prosecution which was a contempt against me, and that newspaper was in contempt, and that newspaper needs to be sued. So I know there's at least one local newspaper that is in trouble when I eventually get this sorted out. So that's it. There. That's a contempt. That newspaper's contempted against me. Never mind the police. So that's one for the newspaper in trouble. I know Lucy Frazer definitely shouldn't have affected Russell Brand, because that's the whole point of why the Speaker says, you know, whether we can allow something or not on the US case. So it's in the courts, right? You know, and I don't think that these MPs should be thrown out of parties. I know parties have got certain guidelines and so forth, but I think it's after you've been convicted when they can throw you out, or they should. Even Jeremy Corbyn, just for saying certain things. This is our prejudice. When the electors elected Corbyn, yeah, he's got his seat. They can't take his seat off him. But if those voters were Labour voters, then those Labour voters have been robbed of someone representing them. Now, when he ran on independent afterwards, and he got voted in as independent, then the independent voters have got the right for their MP. Now, I know that an MP is elected for everyone, but the votes that you win on, they're elected to serve everyone, but the voters who voted for them for the party have got the right for that representative in that party. I'm quite certain. I don't think a political party can remove an MP, at least not till they've been prosecuted and convicted, and if there's a recall petition, you know, that's questionable. But this is not tosh. This is not completely jargon or out there or confused or not understanding anything. I'm quite clear on a number of things that I don't think that Russell Brand should have been demonetised. I think that is a prejudice. And I think Lucy Frazer broke the law of Parliament, just like, you know, because the Speaker didn't give her permission to comment on a legal case. Well, it was commenting on a legal case. It was a comment to YouTube about Russell Brand being charged with something, right? So Lucy Frazer was in the wrong for sure then. And I've seen photographs of her knocking around with judges, you know, like Peter Lodder, who's meant to be hearing this ULEZ case, which is also meant to be protected by privileges of Parliament as well. And these MPs don't even really know their own privilege. So there's a few things. I just want to do a little bit more research on old newspapers and have a little bit of a look how what's been said and how they put it across in the normal main newspaper. Because I've seen some legal newspapers that are purely legal, just to get an idea of what was being published and what wasn't being published and stuff like that. And I'll probably look at some acts, but I definitely know that what's happening is there's prejudice. Now, the thing is but Russell Brand might not have known that. He might have got accused by the police and then worried and scared and then thought they had to say something about it. And then, you know, obviously media outlets find out about these things by, you know, spyware and monitoring people and phone hacking like Prince Harry and all that. And the media really is a very nasty, horrible mess at the moment. It's very hearsay, chat magazine-y. There's a lot of trash and rubbish on there. There was a story on Talk TV, just looked at on YouTube before I started recording this, saying, at last some good news, a new fairgrounds open again. The news think that a fairground opening is good news, like more candy floss, more stupid, you know, exciting rides and, you know, stuff like, you know, it's not good news. You know, it's trash. It's you know, it's I know one newspaper contempt against me for sure, so that's for certain, in a local newspaper. So, you know, it could be that a lot of what the newspapers are doing are illegal, and the courts don't really know or understand because they're just in a different era, in a different time period, and they didn't notice the switchover. It just got slack in the press, and that's really what happened with the right to petition. You know, because courts weren't directly getting involved with the political rights anymore, and it was only between us and Parliament, and because the courts weren't getting involved in it, they kind of like, you know, forgot that it existed, and they weren't dealing with it. So I'm going to call out this Lucy Frazer thing. I think it's quite serious. I think what she's done is she has intervened in legal proceedings. She has done. She has, because what it's done is prejudice Russell Brand, and she was actually an instigator of it. And that's what Starmer wants to do. But yet, Gordon Brown said that he wanted to get rid of Parliament getting involved in legal cases at all. Right? Just totally scrapping it all. And Starmer wants to get rid of the House of Lords, but he's given himself judicial powers, but he doesn't want us, the public, to be able to bring cases to Parliament. So I really don't know what Starmer's doing. I don't know what the Tony Blair mechanisms of implementation is, but it's starting to come out that it seems to be some kind of corporate policy taking over from legislation, you know, government people who aren't meant to have the vote deciding what the country, how the country is going to be run. Bureaucrats, you know, like senior police officers, MI5 chiefs, lobbyists deciding what equipment we're going to have, what we're actually going to have, you know, and so forth. And they can't, they're not even meant to. They're not meant to be able to sit at the table with an MP and say, you know, we want some security cameras, or can we have some? Right? They can't vote. And yet you've got Mark Rowley's there. He's meant to be elected, but he's not. Mark Rowley's meant to be elected, but what's he doing sat at the table with the government saying, you know, can we have some laws changed so I can get these criminals better? Whoa. Just a minute. Since when did Mark Rowley have a vote? Since when did Mark Rowley have a vote on, you know, we'll get some of these new tasers in to get some criminals better. You can have some more money, please, MP. You know, he don't have a say. We vote. We decide what equipment the police is to be getting or not. Right? Now, if we need someone to you know, give us the demo, give us the Brunstrom demo of how the taser works, you know, or whatever, or let's see the statistics. We look at the statistics of how the police are performing, and we decide what equipment they should have or not, right? You know, it's not a court. We don't need professional witnesses. In a court of law, right, you have a professional witness. An act of law actually facilitated for professional witnesses, right? There are no professional witnesses when you turn up at the polling station, right? The professor gets a vote, right? There's no like, this is a professional vote and this is not a professional vote, right? You don't have professional votes and layman votes. You know, laymen didn't used to be able to vote at all, right? That's when you have, like, you know, the Great Reform Act and the middle class people can vote, right? Only knights of the people who own land can vote. Now it turns out that, you know, even people working for the government and the police can vote, and they're actually, what they're doing is, all our petitions are getting rejected by, you know, Jamie Stone, disqualified, yet they're just having a bit of a pun or banter or making a point about, let's change number 10 Downing Street to 10 Davros Street, right? You know, but yet Parliament are paying. I'm not saying they're paying for the adverts, because, like, the adverts are from the party fund and there's spending restrictions. But what I meant to say in the other video, which I uploaded before this, I think, about party spending and the adverts and the sort of Ed Miliband adverts, is that under the parliamentary law of elections, under the jurisdiction of Parliament, under the standards of the House of Commons, which are the same standards as the Petitions Committee, right? And Parliament are going to pay. The candidates are allowed to send one communication to each of their electorate, I think one, and they can claim the money back for that. So Parliament will pay for the postage to send, you know, and I think that they can, I don't think anything stops them from doing a bundle, like a little bundle, if it's under a certain weight. because I know that you've got the voting paper gets delivered to everyone. Everyone gets the voting paper, right? Everyone gets the voting paper because they have to have the voting paper, right? Because it's paid for by the system to vote, right? But I think that each candidate can send one communication for free of charge in the post. And I also found out that we can send petitions to Parliament for free as well. But you're not allowed to seal it up or anything. It's got to be open. So that communication, if they wanted to, could be the Ed Miliband, Alex Salmond graphic. Why not? So what Jamie Stone and Lindsay Hoyle are saying is that when there's an election on, right, Parliament are going to pay for the delivery, right, of loads of little tiny Ed Milibands. I squish your head in your pocket, right? Because that's standards. But when you and me do a petition to Parliament, not allowed any foot, God behest, put a link to a JPEG image, right? God behest, put a link in the petition to Google Drive to a JPEG image of, Keir Starmer in the top pocket. I squish your head, right? No, let's just put it in writing and limited characters in writing. Axe Keir Starmer's Pension Act, right? Oh, we can't have that, or how about change 10 Downing Street to Davros Street, why not? The mayor wants to change street names, so, that's my pitch. That's my pun. That's my pitch. Let's change that. It's actionable. It's actionable by Parliament. There's no swearing in it, right? Oh, I don't like. Are you making a point there? I'm not too keen on the point. It's not to standards. Well, just a minute. Under the law of agency of Parliament to the standards of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle and Jamie Stone are, returning